So I just finished up on a continuing education call with a Perio on building applications with Ruby and Heroku with the Database.com Gem. So I wanted to follow up with the video more in depth with longer length and some more links to different places to get some more information out there. So what I want to do is actually kind of go through steps of helping you get stuff installed and then actually building an app using the Database.com Gem on Heroku. So one of the first things that is kind of a barrier to entry, I think, with Ruby is actually getting it installed. There's so many parts you have to get installed. There's Ruby, there's a database, there's Git, there's Rails, all kinds of stuff you have to get installed. So one of the best ways to do that is there's a couple sites that would help you out. If you're running on Windows, there is the railsinstaller.org that helps you install on Windows machines. On Mac, you can use Homebrew. Homebrew is great because it actually does installation for a number of things that are missing on OS X. So, for instance, you can use Homebrew to install Git or SQLite. It's really easy to install and it helps you out quite a bit. The next one is RVM. Now, if you run on Mac, you probably have Ruby installed, but it may be an older version, or you may have certain gems that require certain versions of Ruby's, or certain frameworks are not compatible. There's all kinds of problems with version control and versioning of different software pieces that run on Ruby. So RVM is great because you can install multiple versions of Ruby on the same computer, and you can easily switch back and forth with them. So you can install Ruby Version Manager and say I want to run with 187 or 192 or whatever version you want to use, and the gems don't conflict. And everybody's had pretty good luck with this, so it's very, very popular. So RVM is another one. Once you get everything installed and you want to start learning about Ruby, you need to go to Rails guides. This is probably the best place to learn Ruby. I think there's a lot of great guides in here. This is actually probably the best ones if you don't know anything about Ruby. It's getting started with Rails. It walks you through the entire process of writing a Rails app. So that's really great. My favorite site that I've gone to quite a bit is Railscast. There's a ton of, he's been doing this for like 3 or 4 or 5 years now. He's got tons of videos you can walk through, typically 5 to 10 minutes long on certain subjects. This one's just getting started with Rails. I use some of the information on here. He also has some really good stuff on all types of topics that you can watch, and you can actually sign up for a professional edition, which gives you more videos that he's kind of marked as private. So these are great stuff. Another one that I like if you want to learn Rails is Rails for Zombies. This is great because it works kind of like CloudSpokes, where it's development challenges. So you watch a short video, like 5 minutes or so, and it talks to you about how Rails works, some coding techniques, and then you actually code it in your browser and submit your code, and it'll tell you if your code's correct or not. And it's about I think 5 or 10 videos that you go through in a number of steps, but it's a great way to learn Rails. And this is actually part of Code School. I'm a subscriber to Code School, and they have a lot of great videos and in-browser coding challenges using different things. jQuery, CSS, they have HTML5, a lot of great stuff. One of the ones that I really like that they have also is called Try Ruby. And it's the same concept where you actually write Ruby code in your browser and you evaluate it, and it tells you if it's right. And this is a great way to kind of mess around with the Ruby language also. And one of the last but not least is Ruby on Rails tutorial. And I think everybody who attended Dreamforce last year got a copy of this book. So you can either use the book that you got from Dreamforce, or it's all available online. So you can go through here. It has everything from IDEs, development, installation, all kinds of things that you can actually go through here and run these applications that you can build. And he also has a video tutorial series. So it's similar to the book, but it actually takes up and goes further. And it's really great. I've been watching this for a couple months now. I really like it. And then the last but not least is the Rails documentation, or the Ruby documentation for Rails. So you can check that out too. So that's something you definitely need to know. All right, so we're going to build an app with the Database.com Gem. Now, the gem is actually just it's a wrapper around the Salesforce REST API, and it covers both S-objects and chatter. We're probably just going to do S-objects right now. I'm not going to deal with chatter. But there's full CRUD support for deletes, updates, inserts, all that stuff. And it has OAuth baked right into it. So it's really great for security. It offloads all that security into Salesforce. So to get started with that, the gem is actually right here. Here's the gem. All the source code's on GitHub, and it tells you how to install the gem in here, and there's also a link to the docs, so you can go look at the docs. I would also recommend watching this session from Dreamforce last year. It's a great session by Danny Burks. He actually, I think, wrote the gem, and he's on the mailing list. So if you submit to the gem's mailing list, Danny Burks, he actually does a lot of the responses that you'll get from him. So I would also recommend watching this video. It's about an hour long, but it walks you slowly and completely through the API, or through the gem. So it's really good stuff. Okay, so what are we going to do here? So if you're not familiar with Ruby, everything in Ruby runs from the command line. So if you don't like the command line, and you don't like running Git, and you like browser, you're going to be in for a little bit of surprise. But after a little while, it's quite easy to get used to using the command line. So one of the great things about Ruby is that everything runs from the command line, and I can run the code without actually opening anything else. I can type it right in the terminal. So now if I type IRB, which is interactive Ruby, I'll get the prompt, and I can do things like 1 + 1. You know, I can create new objects in here. I can insert things in the database. I can do a lot of different things. And we'll kind of look at this console version of Ruby using a Rails app in a minute too. So, okay. So one thing about Rails is that it's very RESTful. Everything has that natural REST pattern. It's resource based. It's model view controller. So when you create a Rails app, you get the model classes, you get the views, and you get the controllers that handles all the heavy lifting for you. So we're kind of going to go through that, build an app, and walk through that. So let's do that here. So let me get out of here. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new Rails app. So I'm going to create one here. I'm going to call it Database.com Rails Demo. Oh, sorry. Let me try this one more time here. Got someone ping me over here. So we're going to do Database.com Rails Demo. So that'll create a new application for me, and then I'm going to go ahead and switch to this directory when it pops up here. Should be any second now. There we go. So all right, so now I'm in that directory, so let me go and open up a TextMate. Most of the Rails developers actually work in TextMate or some kind of text editor. Not very many that I've talked to work in an IDE, so just be ready for that. It's very easy to work with once you start working with Ruby in general, and either the Rails framework or the Sinatra framework. Everything's done right from the text editor. So this is the app that it actually spun up for me. So you can see there's a bunch of folders that created. There's a controller in here. It actually generated a controller for me. If I was using a database, I'd have some views would go in there. I'm sorry, some models in there, and then my views will be in here. And then another important folder you're going to run into quite a bit is the config folder, and we'll hit that in a second. And then lib has some modules that you might create that are custom. So we'll walk through that in a second here. So all right, let me switch back to here. So first thing we have to do is we have to talk about gems. Now gems are kind of like DLLs. They're just components that you add to your application for functionality. So every application uses gems. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open the gem file from this Rails app. And this is what you get when you generate a new Rails app, and some stuff I don't need here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually paste in the gems that I need. So I need these gems right here. So I need the Rails gem, the SQLite database gem to run locally by default, Database.com gem, the Database.com Rails gem, which gives you some helper methods and makes life a little easier building Rails apps with the Database.com gem, and then the Heroku gem. So now I've got these in my gem file. I need to actually get them into my system. So Ruby uses something called bundler, which actually grabs all your dependencies, downloads them for you, and installs them on your machine. So it makes life much easier because previous versions of Ruby and Rails, there was always dependency hells when you have wrong versions. So bundlers does a great job making sure that your dependencies are all intact for your machine. So I'm going to go bundle install, and there it goes. So I download all my dependencies. So next thing I'm going to do is use Git. So you cannot push an application to Heroku without Git. That's the deployment mechanism for that. So Git's very simple to install. I think I talked about doing that with Homebrew. So you can install Git, and once you do, it's pretty simple to add your application to the source control. So in this case, the source control is all locally, and then you actually push it to a remote repository. In this case, we're going to be pushing it to Heroku as a remote repository. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick here. So I'm going to create a new repository, and then I'm going to actually add all my files. Add all the files I just created, and then we're going to commit it. Commit it. Okay, so we got that. So now what we're going to do, we've got all the code for this basic app. We've got it in Git. So now let's go ahead and create a repository on Heroku so I can push my application to Heroku and get it running for the world to see. So now let's go ahead and create a Heroku app, which is very simple. Again, it's off the command line. Just say Heroku create. You can specify a name here. If you don't, it will go ahead and choose one for you, and they're usually awesome names like Rowdy Monkey 72 or all kinds of great stuff. So this one's Afternoon Warrior 1420. So that's an awesome name. So now I've got that. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to push my code up to this repo on Heroku, and so we can run this in the browser. So I'm going to go git push. So I'm going to push the master branch to Heroku. And that might take a second here. I'm going to pause this while this does this. So just finish up the push to Heroku. It takes a few minutes the first time because it installs all the gem files, but you can see here that it compiled it and launched the application. It's ready to start serving it. So now I'm going to do Heroku open, and it's going to open that up in the browser and show my application. And of course it's in the other browser. So there's my application I've got right there. Alright, so there's my URL. And now we can actually easily, throughout this course's progress, is actually push more code to Heroku. But I'm going to develop it locally just because it's faster and we don't have to wait for it to push, but it's the same effect. So now that we've got our app up on Heroku, we've got it in Git, let's go ahead and start building something. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start the server up here. So let me get a new terminal window open here, and I'm going to do Rails S to start it up. That starts it up. So what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and build some. We're going to build an app that just basically gets a list of accounts, displays the details for an account, and then it searches for the accounts. So that's going to be pretty simple. So first thing we need to do is we need to set up the connection between Database.com Gem on my application and my Salesforce org that I'm using. So that's done with what's called the Database.com YAML file, and YAML is just a way to store like strings for configuration. So I'm going to add this here. So I'm going to add a new file called database.com.yaml. All right. And so now I do that, I have to get my client secret and client ID because again this works on with OAuth. So if I go back here, this is my Force.com app. I'm in. So if I go to remote access, now I'm going to use an existing one, and I'll just change all my passwords and tokens once I get done with this. So one of the cool things about the Database.com Gem is you don't have to have an SSL to run it. It doesn't require that. So it doesn't even require the correct URL either. You can actually be running on production with the same callback URL because it's not being used. So that's a nice thing we have in there, but it's required. So what I have to do is now I'm going to go ahead and grab my consumer key, consumer secret, and add that in. But I already have it in this file here, so just paste this in. I'll talk about what it is. Alright, so here's my client secret, and you can kind of see it's the same thing as right here. I've got my client ID, my client secret, I've got my username, which I'll change in a minute, and my password, all that stuff I'll change, and debugging. If you leave debugging on, there's a bunch of stuff that comes through. If you definitely want to see a lot of traffic, you can turn debugging on, but I'm going to leave it off for right now. So now that I have that, so there's my database.com connection. And so one thing I want to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I need to actually, let's go ahead and check on the routes here. Now the routes tell the application how to serve up the page. Oh, I didn't actually create my controller yet. So let's go ahead. We're going to go ahead and generate the controller. So that'll give us the model view and controllers for all this for this application. Like I said, we're going to create an application that displays a list of accounts. So we're going to use Rails to generate a controller for accounts, and we're going to give it the pages for index, show, and search. So let me hit that. It's going to go ahead and generate all these files for us, and you'll watch on the left it'll pop up in a second. So if I click on this, you'll see they'll pop up now. So there's my accounts controller. You'll see my routes just changed, just added some routes in here. Got all that for us. So now I'm going to go ahead and edit these routes. So we don't need all of this stuff here. So all we need is this route. Get all this stuff. And before we do that, let's go ahead and run this app and see what we get here. So let's go ahead and go to localhost. So we should get the default welcome aboard app. So okay. So now what I'm going to do is I've got 3 pages here. I've got an index page. Index typically shows a list. Show displays the details of one, and then I have a search page also. So, but I want to have a default home page. So I have a route. So the route's going to be accounts index. So I've got to do that. So let's see if I run this now. So let me save this. If I run this now, it should be different. Ah, it's not. So what happens is there's actually a file in the public directory right here. So if I look in this public, if this directory is right, if that file's in the directory, it always serves that file no matter what. So I've got to delete this file. So I can delete that. So I'm going to remove this public index file. And now if I go back here again, you see now I'm at my accounts index file. That's my home page. So you can set a home page to any route that you would like. Okay, so now we have that. Let's go ahead and generate the page that actually displays a list of accounts for us. So I'm going to go back in here, and I'm going to go to the accounts controller, and we have to add a little magic. So we have to actually extend this from the Database.com gem. So that includes the Database.com controller gem. And then what I want to do is I want to get here a list of accounts. So we're going to get all accounts in my org. Make sure I got that right. I'm going to paste this in because I don't trust myself sometimes. All right, so we got that. And then what I also want to do is I want to display these accounts. So let's see if I go down in the views here. There's my index file. This is the one, of course, I'm showing right here. I'm going to go ahead and replace this with the code here, and that basically grabs the accounts that were fetched from my controller, iterates over them, and it displays their name for each one of the accounts. So let's first go in here and see. Let's look at the accounts I have in here first, just to see that I've got good stuff in here. So there's all my accounts we have in here. All right. So now I've got my controller, which grabs all the accounts, and then my view, which displays the accounts. So let's go ahead and run this. There you go. That's how easy it was to do that. So there's my list of all my accounts. Looks familiar. Okay, so we got that. So that's an easy way to get those out of there. So now let's make it so that way you can actually click on one of these accounts and display the details. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is I need to make a change in the routes file, again, to tell the application what pages to serve up. And I want to move this, I want to actually change this, and I want to have a named route. So this says we're going to actually have a route, we're going to pass over the ID, and we're going to go to the account show method in my controller. So I'm going to change that. And then in my controller, I need to actually fetch this. I need to fetch this account. So I'm going to get an account, and it's going to say find it by the ID that I'm going to pass over. Rails has a params hash, and everything you submit, an URL or form, is done. Everything's done in a hash basically. So you got to learn to love hashes, which is awesome. So we have that now. And then in the index page on display the list, this page right here, I'm going to actually change this to actually make this clickable. So let's go back to this list page, and I'm going to change this right here. And cool thing about it is there's a lot of helpers in Rails that makes life easier for you. So instead of doing a link and an HTML link and adding the ID onto it and all that kind of stuff, they have a link to tag where this is the display name. So I'm displaying the name of the account, and then I'm going to tell Ruby to use, or Rails to use the path that I've already specified. So here's the path right here. This is account, so it gives you some stuff for free. It gives you an account path to get you to this method in their controller, and then I'm going to pass over the account ID. All right, so do that, and then to display it, I'm going to actually add some code to the display, to the show page, and I'm going to make it display the account name, the type, industry, and phone. All right, so then we got everything there. So now if I go back here and refresh, you'll see I got my URLs now. If I mouse over them, you can see at the bottom all the IDs change, and then I'm going to go to Gene Point, and you'll see there's Gene Point. There's the ID it passed over. Grab that ID, called Salesforce using the gem, and grab this data out and displays it. And then I'm going to go here to Dickinson, say same thing. All right. So that's a pretty simple way, a couple lines of code to actually get a list of accounts out of Salesforce and show the details on them. So it's pretty good stuff. So now the last thing we want to do is we want to actually do a search, because search uses actually something a little different. It uses the client configuration here. So what I'm going to do now is I want to basically do the same thing here, but instead of doing just a list, I might do a SQL query. So I'm going to go in here, and I need to open up the controller again, the accounts controller, and I want to make some change to the search here. So what I'm going to do is just paste this code in, and I'll talk about it. So this is the configuration for that loads the database.com. So I get a config by loading the YAML file. It gives me I get a new config client by passing the config over into it, and then I authenticate using my username and password that's stored in this database.com YAML file, and then I'm going to get a collection of accounts by running a query. I'm going to select the ID and the name from accounts where the name is like United. So I'm just going to do that. Then let me change the I'm going to do the search of the view page. And all I'm going to do is basically take the same code that I took from the index page, this exact same code, and just paste it in here. Paste it in here. So we should only get a subset of accounts, ones where the name is like United. All right, so now let me go ahead and, let's see. I know I did this the last time too. I need to move this up here because the routes actually run in precedence. So accounts actually is the same as this one. So if it finds search, if it finds that first in the list, it'll run that before it was looking for an ID and it couldn't find one. So now if I run this again, I'll get these right here. So maybe we want to change this. Let's change this code real quick, and we'll say Gene. I run that. I should get Gene Point. So that's a real quick demo of the Database.com Gem. One of the cool things I want to show you about it that I really like is you can run, like a minute ago how I ran pure Ruby through the console, you can also do that with your Rails app. So you can actually, let me get a new tab here, you can actually run this application just as you would through the browser. So I'll do Rails console, and that loads the context of my, my Rails app in my console. And now I can run all of my commands like I normally would here. So we'll do some things here. So let me go ahead. I have to actually set up a new, this is kind of manual, but I have to set up a new client. So I had to do config. So I added a new config. It read my YAML file, and you can see all the data it brought back here. I'm going to create a new client with that configuration. There's all that. And then I'm actually going to authenticate and get my access token back. So there's my access token you see back here. And now I'm going to do things like, first thing I have to do is I have to what's called materialize the account object. It's kind of set up the object like an S object. So I have to do that first. So I'm going to materialize the account object, and then I can do things like account all. It's going to get all my accounts out of there. I can do account first. It's going to grab the first one. You can see there's the first account in there. I can do account last, gets the last one out. And then I can do some cool things like I can search for accounts. So there's one here. I can get account. I can say account.find by name and pass it in the name of the account. It'll grab that. So there's that. And then I can output account. There's my account that I got. And then I can do things like I can actually update it. So let's see, where's my account here? We'll do this. This was this account right here. So let's go ahead and update. Let's go ahead and update the employees. So I can do I can do account.update attributes, the attribute I want to update, number of employees, and use the hash rocket and say I want to set it to 300. There we go. So set that. Now if I refresh this, it should say 300 right here. So there we go. So that's how you can actually run a lot of these commands right through the terminal, so that you can do a lot of testing without having to go to the browser. So there you go. That is a quick demo of using the Database.com Gem to write applications in Ruby for Heroku. Thanks.